first down. The handoff to Marlon Mack. Huge hole, 50-yard line. He's at the 40, still going near sideline. He's at the 10. He's at the 5, and he will score. Touchdown, Marlon Mack. Touchdown, INDY. And again, it's picked up. It's Darius Leonard. Leonard with his second INT, and he's streaking down the near sideline. He's at the 40. He's at the 30. He's at the 20. He's going to go. A pick six for the Maniac.
Horseshoe is back, baby. The horseshoe is back.
What's going on, Colts fans? Welcome back to another episode of the Bring the Juice podcast. I am your host, Cody Felger. Joining me, your other host, Derek Larger. Derek, how have you been, my friend? How are you doing?
Tired as can be, but, excited to crank out some more Colts content and really happy to see ourselves on our way to 2,000 subs.
Yeah, absolutely. That's super exciting. Yeah, for those of you who are listening, we've talked about, Derek and I were talking about a few days ago, we're getting closer and closer. I believe we're about under 80 subscribers now till we reach 2,000, which is an incredible milestone for us. And so, we wanted to do something, from the money that we made through the monetization and stuff. We were going to originally, invest in some stuff to go down to training camp this year. Well, obviously the Colts have said there's going to be no training camp for the fans. They're going to do it in their own facility. And so we're probably not going to be able to go down this year. So what we wanted to do was take a little bit of that money that we had, potentially put away for that and do some giveaways just to say thank you to you guys for all your listenership and all your support of us. It's been an incredible ride these last few months, really since March and since everything happened in our country with the coronavirus. Our content and our channel has really exploded, and it's all because of you guys, our listeners. And so we just wanted to say thank you to you and do a couple different giveaways, a couple Colts giveaways for you guys once you do reach that milestone. It's coming really quickly. It's super exciting, Derek. I know we've talked about off air, but it might be a little cool for our listeners to kind of hear. So Derek, I'm curious, from your perspective, you've been with this podcast almost a year now, to be a year here very soon. Tell me about your perspective of the journey that we've kind of had. Came on, we weren't even close to 1,000 subscribers. Now we're almost here to 2,000. What's your perspective been, man, of just joining this podcast and seeing all the support and love from our listeners?
Yeah, it was really cool when I first came on. I knew that you had a little bit of a following in the Colts community, and that's kind of what I wanted to get into. I kind of wanted to do a podcast, but didn't necessarily know how to get into it on my own right away. And, having you with that experience and just having someone to talk to certainly helped me to get where I wanted to go. And obviously with the content side of things, we're doing a much better job, I think, now of getting that content out more consistently and better content, if I say so myself. And, that the months of March and April, that was absolutely insane what you and I were going through those 2 months. I think that we actually more than doubled our podcast subscriber count in those 2 months altogether. It was quite astonishing to think of when you think about it, but it was really cool to see every video getting thousands and thousands of views. So we appreciate every single one of you guys that were watching those, and it's cool to be a part of this. And I'm glad I got to finally meet you, Cody, and get to grow this friendship that you and I have now. It's kind of weird that Twitter sometimes does its thing in good ways rather than bad. So, it's been fun, man. It's been really fun. And, we kind of were talking about it off air that we're kind of upset that, training camp didn't necessarily fall into our laps this year. We're going to have issues with that, I think. But, outside of that, man, I'm just really wanting this season to get started. I really want to get back to talking more Colts football in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. And I know it's been a few days since we posted a video, and so we wanted to jump back into Colts content. We want to start a new series, kind of looking at the different position groups. Now, there might be a few positions that we feel like we can kind of combine, but for this video, we want to look specifically at the quarterback group. Now, this is a group that has really experienced, there's a lot of overhaul that's happened and additions that have happened this year to the Colts. But this position group in particular is one of the ones that had a lot of additions into it, and that's the quarterback room. And we'll start here with the biggest move that the Colts made in free agency, adding to their quarterback room. They add the 38-year-old quarterback, Phillip Rivers, previously of the Chargers. He's a guy that, last year statistically came off one of his worst years. He obviously the yards, the completion percentage, they were still there. He actually had one of his better years in terms of passing yards at 4,615 yards, and he still had a good completion percentage. But here's the thing that really threw a lot of people off. He only had 3 more touchdowns than interceptions last year. He had 23 touchdowns against 20 interceptions. Obviously, it wasn't good. The Chargers went, from having, being one of the best teams in the AFC in 2018 at 12-4 to one of the bottom teams in the AFC at 5-11. And for obvious reasons, they were picking in the top 10, and they selected their quarterback of the future in Justin Herbert. But, Frank Reich was kind of talking a little bit about Phillip Rivers and just kind of about, what they felt like Phillip Rivers, the reasoning, I guess, behind about why they feel like there were so many interceptions that Phillip Rivers threw in 2019. Derek, what's your perspective here? Hearing these different guys who have worked with Phillip Rivers before and guys who now, I've studied his tape a lot more than anybody else has. What's your take here on Phillip Rivers and why the Colts believe that he could potentially turn it around and have more of a 2018 Phillip Rivers season than a 2019 season?
Well, I think you have to, when you look back at Phillip Rivers last season, you have to look at all the underlying factors, right? I think that everyone kind of mentions how the offensive line, that was the biggest issue, right? They had the 28th ranked pass offensive line in all of football. So when you have one of the worst offensive lines in football protecting you, you're a lot of times going to have bad years. And of course, him being 37, it's not like this is Andrew Luck, or Andrew Luck at the age of 26, who's young, has just an amazing arm and things of that nature. Phillip Rivers is not going to be able to do that because of age and limitations and things of that nature. And I mean, that's ultimately the biggest reason. And, the Chargers had a lot of issues when it came to running back Melvin Gordon holding out. Not sure what his status was towards the team in the end. So there wasn't much of a run game for the Chargers in the beginning. I know Eckler could do that, but Eckler couldn't quite carry the load like others could. And, it just felt like the atmosphere of the team wasn't in a good spot. And when the atmosphere of the team and the direction of the team is uncertain, that can cause problems as well. And, the Chargers were dealing with the fans and the stadium and all this other stuff. There's so many issues that came with the Chargers, but now you have a place in Indy where Frank Reich and Chris Ballard were willing to kind of overlook a couple of those things, because you're in Indianapolis, a place that Phillip Rivers so far in the week that he's been here says he really enjoys. Actually, they said he just got acquainted with Jack Doyle and Paris Campbell, actually had a couple throwing sessions with them this last week. So that's, if you're wanting to bet on stock on two wide receivers / tight ends, buy stock on Doyle and Paris Campbell, because things are going to get lit with those guys. But again, you came to the Colts can offer more to a quarterback of that caliber, of that age, of that kind of precedent than other teams can. They can provide a great offensive line, which they have. They have a great running game, which they have. They have a young and continuously improving defense, which it is. And so what quarterback would not want to come here? And Frank Reich, obviously, with his expertise and his knowledge of working as a QB in the NFL, and his relationship with Rivers back in San Diego. I mean, the stars completely aligned when it came to this situation. So it makes total sense that Phillip Rivers would be going to Indianapolis because, you can say whatever you want about him over the last year, but also remember 2 years ago what Phillip Rivers was. 2 years ago, Phillip Rivers was widely regarded as a top 5 quarterback that year. I mean, many people did have him as a top 5 quarterback. His numbers were up there. And, it's just how the team performed around him. Obviously, he had his own issues, but with what the Colts are able to bring, it's much better of a situation than what he was when he was with the Chargers in 2018.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned all those different things. The offensive line, the running game. The Colts were top half of the league in running game, top 10 in running game, almost top 5. Chargers were near the bottom of the league. One of the worst offensive lines in terms of pass protection. And the Chargers were also playing, a lot behind a lot of times. And I think that can't be understated as well, Derek, because, you saw that similar to Andrew Luck, in the Ryan Griggs and Chuck Pagano days. The Colts had to have Andrew Luck sling it, or the Colts were not going to be competitive in games. And I think that's kind of a similar situation last year to how it was with the Chargers. And, you mentioned it, Phillip Rivers, 37 years old at that time. He's not a 26-year-old Andrew Luck who can throw off 2 defenders and find a wide open T.Y. Hilton. He's just not that type of player. I mean, he's immobile. He's just that type of quarterback, especially up there at that age. And, when you're putting it on his shoulders, I know he had some good pass catching targets, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, and the rest of them. But, it does make a difference when, it's all on you. It's kind of like, if I don't score here, my team's going to lose. And so I think the Colts feel like, and they should, the Colts feel like they have a better support system around Phillip Rivers in terms of the offensive line, the running game, even the defense, I think will be much improved. The Colts feel like now they, with adding a guy like DeForest Buckner, now they have one of the best players at that position. And so I think all those factors will really help Phillip Rivers, and he won't have to throw the ball 30, 40 times in a game. Ideally, the Colts can rely on the running game. Phillip Rivers can use that RPO game. He can do a lot of different things. He's a very smart quarterback. But the Colts have said, and Frank Reich and Phillip Rivers even, talked to the media and said, I don't feel like I have fallen off physically. And the Colts don't feel that either. And so, it's just something of giving Phillip Rivers help, similar to what the Colts were unable to do with Andrew Luck, just giving your quarterback some help so he doesn't have to win you games per se. Now, he may have to win you games at certain points, when it comes down to it, but every single week you're not behind, right? You have help for him. I think that'll be tremendous for Phillip Rivers, and also the familiarity with Frank Reich, Nick Sirianni and such. And so I certainly think, there's a lot of factors to why the Colts believe, and I believe that it'll be a much better situation for Phillip Rivers all the way around. Now we can move to the backup quarterback, Jacoby Brissett. Last year he played for the Colts. He played in 15 games for the Colts. He posted a 7-8 record, almost 3,000 yards, almost 61 completion percentage, 18 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. So on paper, not a terrible season, but we saw a major drop, a very noticeable drop, Derek, from the beginning of the season. Now, Jacoby Brissett wasn't lighting the world on fire. Let's not pretend like he was a top 10 or top 5 quarterback. I mean, he was solid, and he kept the Colts in games, and they had a winning record for a reason. But, there was also a lot of those games were very close, if you remember. But, the second half of the season, it just seemed like after that injury happened in that Pittsburgh game, he just was never the same. And the Colts really, they went from a 5-2 record all the way to a 7-9 record. And so, that's something that I think we got that is noticeable. And, you can obviously point to the Colts having the 28th worst passing attack in terms of vertical threat. There's a lot of things that you can factor into it. But at least for this season, Jacoby Brissett's going to be your backup quarterback. Derek, what are you thinking here for Jacoby Brissett? Kind of like long-term, should the Colts do anything with Jacoby Brissett? And what do you think he can kind of bring to this Colts offense? Maybe not on the field if Phillip Rivers, he's been an Iron Man so far, but if Phillip Rivers, plays all 16 games, what do you think Jacoby Brissett can offer, to Phillip Rivers and to some of these other quarterbacks we're going to talk about in that backup quarterback role?
Yeah, this is an issue because you never know what Jacoby Brissett's going to want to try to do with his future after these few years. It's going to be interesting to see how the situation of that plays out. Look, I mean, Frank Reich has already said that Jacoby Brissett has taken the backup role with an open heart, has, accepted it, and he has embraced it, and he's going to be happy to be a part of this again. And he's just glad to be on the team and helping in any way he can. And that's the kind of teammate that you want. I mean, he really is that guy that you really want in the locker room because he just makes you feel like a brother at every moment in time. Phillip Rivers is the guy that's going to keep things accountable. Maybe he's a little bit more vocal than Jacoby Brissett, but Jacoby Brissett's the very quiet, embraceful kind of guy. And, I'm just going to say this for all the people out there. Let's stop saying that Jacoby Brissett's knee was the reason why he dropped. Okay. Jacoby Brissett has never been known for his athleticism. Okay. He's never been known for that. He's never been a guy that has to go out there and make plays with his feet like a Kyler Murray or other guys like that make plays with their feet. He's never been that. So there's something that messed with him mentally after that injury. And after that, he just never felt confident. And I don't know if he'll ever get that back again. Who knows? Maybe Phillip Rivers does him a favor. Maybe Phillip Rivers actually does bring out the side of Jacoby Brissett that Jacoby Brissett doesn't know he has. Maybe that's a thing. Who knows? Maybe next year or 2 years down the road when Phillip Rivers is done, Jacoby Brissett actually finds that key. And maybe Jacoby Brissett is the future quarterback. Who knows? But Jacoby Brissett is a very quality backup because, we know what he can do. He's very familiar with the system. He's a average quarterback when you get him in there, as most backup QBs are. So it makes total sense that you got a Jacoby Brissett there at that second spot behind Phillip Rivers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of crazy because it's kind of like fire and water type of thing, at least from what their play has been. Jacoby Brissett's a guy who won't turn the ball over much, but he won't really take the deep shot. And we saw that multiple times. He was missing guys that were open down the field. And he's just a guy, it's not like he doesn't have an arm. He does. He has a pretty good arm. I just think sometimes he doesn't trust himself fully. He doesn't want to take those risks. And on the other hand, Phillip Rivers is the guy, he doesn't care about how many interceptions he throws. He just wants to win the game. And he's willing to, I saw some throws watching some of Phillip Rivers, some of his highlights from last year, like throws that Jacoby Brissett would not dare to take. But I think there could be potentially a good, kind of balance for both of these guys to kind of figure that out. More so Jacoby Brissett learning from Phillip Rivers that, taking risks isn't a bad thing. And I think that that's something that but maybe rubs off on Jacoby Brissett. Who knows? But I think it'll also be kind of an interesting and really good situation for the next guy on our list, Jacob Eason, the guy that the Colts drafted this year, the only quarterback that'll be under contract after this year. And he's the guy that was projected potentially, in the second round for some people. The Colts got him as a steal in the fourth round, potentially the quarterback of the future for the Colts. But he's a guy that kind of has a little bit of Phillip Rivers in him in the terms of, he's not afraid to take risks, had a pretty good year. But, Frank Reich has been pretty adamant, when they were drafted him, and Chris Ballard has been very candid, like, let's not crown this guy as the next savior of the Colts. Like, he's still got a lot of work to do. Like, I know that a lot of people projected him potentially earlier than when the Colts got him, but, there is a reason why he fell to the fourth round. And I think that, he's got some work to do. And the fortunate thing is he can kind of see both sides of playing the quarterback position with Jacoby Brissett, a guy who takes care of the ball, and Phillip Rivers, a guy who's not afraid to be aggressive and push the ball down the field, which I think is more so Jacob Eason's style. Derek, what are you thinking? How valuable do you think these two quarterbacks, kind of the yin and yang, if you will, how do you think that could potentially serve a guy like Jacob Eason really well?
Well, Jacob Eason obviously is still a young quarterback that needs a lot more experience and to soak up knowledge from guys like Phillip Rivers, Jacoby Brissett, and Frank Reich. I mean, that's very pivotal for him. We've said it. He's not just young in age, he's young in playing time. I mean, this guy's literally only played 2 full seasons worth of games in college. So he's not very experienced. So, it's one of those things that it's good for him to learn behind espionages like a Phillip Rivers. And, with the help of being behind a good, wholesome culture that we have and the offensive line that we have and the system and the way we want to do things, it just feels like a perfect fit for a guy like Jacob Eason. It's funny because people keep talking about his potential. Does he actually want to play? Just stop with that nonsense. Stop with the nonsense. He would not have gone through this if he didn't think he could. And not to mention, anyone that you ever talk to that has ever played with him, coached him, whatever, says he may be quiet at times, but he sure as hell will play every single down to the best of his ability in order to be able to win the game. So stop with the nonsense that he doesn't want to win.
Yeah. Yeah, Jacob Eason, a guy that's already, started to do stuff with different players. He's one of those guys who's taken the lead, and I think that's certainly a good sign for the young signal caller. And I think that's something that definitely, he's on the right track. And I know you said there's been people who have kind of questioned his desire to play the game. I think he's certainly off to a good start. And he even said he wants to prove that he's passionate about this game, and certainly has done that so far, made a good impression early on. But yeah, I think he's a guy that he's got all the physical tools. He's not afraid to push the ball down the field, and he's not going to be thrown into the fire, which I think is a good option for the Colts, especially a guy like you mentioned. He hasn't played a lot of snaps, honestly. I mean, he's only played in 19 games total in his college career, and so he's still very young as a quarterback. And I think that's good for his development to continue to do that. Even if he was a starter, I think he would have a lot of help around him. But now that he's able to kind of sit back and watch, 2 different guys who have played at the NFL level, Jacoby Brissett's actually played in a Super Bowl, so he knows that kind of that championship mindset. Phillip Rivers is a guy who's, probably going to be a future Hall of Famer. So he's able to watch 2 guys who have kind of reached the pinnacle, if you will, of the game. 2 guys in their own rights, Jacoby Brissett as a backup, Phillip Rivers as a starter, who have both, been to big stages before. And I think that'll help. I know there's been some potential concerns also about, the fourth quarter and stuff like that with Jacob Eason as well. So I think all in all, and especially, just the coaching staff and how great they are with quarterbacks, Frank Reich being a former quarterback, so he kind of gets it. And I think it's just a perfect situation, like you said, for a guy like Jacob Eason. And, but Chris Ballard was talking about it. He said, this is the last guy we're going to talk about looking at the quarterback position. He said Jacob Eason's going to have to battle Chad Kelly, a guy last year who played in the preseason with the Colts. He actually kind of played really well, all things considered, for the Colts in 2019. He was a former 7th-round pick in 2017, formerly with the Denver Broncos. He's a guy that a lot of people, for some reason, have hyped up. I don't really know where all the hype's coming from because he was playing against like 2nd, 3rd stringers. But a lot of people have
that
hyped
doesn't
him
matter,
up.
Cody. You have to understand. People say that doesn't matter. He was balling against those great preseasoners. Okay, put him in 3rd or 2nd on the depth chart. Okay, he easily did what Jacoby Brissett would have done.
Oh man,
It's just.
oh dear. But Chad Kelly, the 4th quarterback right now, probably won't make this roster, honestly. We might have some comments from those Chad Kelly truthers out there who disagree strongly. They think Chad Kelly is the future, but let's be real, it's not going to happen, folks. Yeah, but all joking aside, Derek, a guy like Chad Kelly, he did have a pretty nice, preseason last year. I thought he showed some things, but like you said, it's against backup guys, most of which are not going to make the final 53-man roster. It's not like he's playing against, live bullets, first-string type of guys. So, for me, it's a guy who, at the end, he's more of a camp body. Maybe he's the guy that, plays in some preseason games, but really, overall, doesn't make the final 53-man roster. I'm not sure if they can even put him on the practice squad, but maybe if they can, he's a guy they sneak onto the practice squad. But overall, I don't see him making the final 53-man roster. I see a guy like Jacob Eason, a guy that, was a lot more investment from the Colts side, making the final 53-man roster over him. Did you have any thoughts here, Derek, on a guy like Chad Kelly?
No, I think you hit it pretty well. There's not a whole lot for me to really say when it comes to Chad Kelly. It's unfortunate for Chad Kelly, but he's limited. So that's pretty much all I got for Chad Kelly in that regard.
Yeah, that sounds good. But that wraps up our kind of first look here in the start of this series, looking at all the different position groups for the Colts. Looked at the quarterback group. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on all these guys, kind of your thoughts on, all the way from Phillip Rivers to Chad Kelly. There may be some people in the comments, like I said earlier, who defend Chad Kelly and think he actually has a shot at this roster, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts, and we would both love to just debate you guys in the comments because we love that kind of stuff. But we'll be back soon. We'll probably be looking at the skill positions next. That's probably the next thing on our agenda. But for Derek and myself, thank you guys for listening. And as always, go Colts.